Hello and welcome to the first in my series of Masterclass videos for Oscidia, my new wavetable synthesizer. In this video I'm going to assume no prior knowledge of Oscidia, and I'm going to jump right in and show you some of the key points that you should know before you run the app for the first time. Now I'm sure the first thing anyone is going to want to do is to try a few presets, and we can do this using the preset manager. Now at the top left of the display next to the menu is a preset button which displays the last selected preset. Now if we tap on this we get the preset manager. Inside there we have different categories, and each category has a number of presets. So let's select a preset and try it out. So currently velocity sensitivity is enabled, but we can tap the velocity sensitivity button to turn that off, and now all notes played are an equal velocity. We can alter the release time using the amp envelope here, or control the attack if we wish. Now let's go back to the preset manager by pressing the last preset button and trying something from the keys category. Notice how this preset swells after we release a key, and we'll explain how that's done a little bit later. Those last two presets make good use of stereo spread, so each oscillator is panned either left or right. And this patch makes good use of legato and articulation to create some vibrato. Now if while browsing the presets you find a preset that you actually like, you can actually favourite that preset. It's slightly different in this app to previous apps. You actually double tap on the right hand side of the preset. So you simply select a preset and then double tap on the right hand side, and that way it becomes a favourite, indicated by the little star on the right hand side of the preset. Now to access your favourites list we need to exit the program manager and just swipe down on this current preset button, and the favourite list will pop up, and we're able to select from this list to change preset. Now let's return to the preset manager, and I'll just deselect those two favourites by double tapping. Now while we're looking at presets, I want to take a special look at the sequence folder because it's important to get a few concepts over to you at this point. There's a couple of presets here, all with very similar sounding names. Now let's switch to the sequencer tab so we can see what's going on. Now these are rhythmic patterns which could use one or more arps, but the important thing to note is there's no pitch data involved. I'll start by playing a single note and I'll progress to playing chords. Now if you look at the pitch row, you'll see that they're all 0. There is no pitch involved here. Which means it works great with chords. So all this rhythmic content is created by the sequencer, being able to manipulate each oscillator in turn, as well as the filter envelopes and the filter morphing. Now these 4 presets are very similar, but let's listen to the second variation of that. Now I want you to stop and think about when you've used arpeggiators or sequencers in the past. When you've played a chord and the arpeggiator starts on the wrong note. And this is because the arpeggiator starts straight away on the first note it detects, and nobody necessarily presses all the notes of a chord at exactly the right time. So with that in mind, I want to explain these first 2 buttons on the sequencer toolbar. The first of which is the sequencer enable button. So if we disable this button, we get to hear the raw preset. So enable this button to engage the sequencer. The most important button is this beta line button, this second button here. And if I turn that off, it means that the sequencer would start immediately when I press a key. But the problem is I have to be so precise when I press a chord so that it doesn't react to the first note. What we want the sequencer to do is to wait for all notes of the chord to be registered before the sequence starts. So if you're playing live, this button needs to be on. Because if it's not turned on and you're playing live, the sequencer will start on whichever note you press first, and this isn't necessarily wanted. Now, so when do we turn this button off? And the answer to that is if you are driving the sequencer from a DAW that sends all the notes perfectly in time, then you turn this off. Otherwise, the sequencer will wait for the next beat, and that is not what you want when you're driving this from an external sequencer or a DAW. Now some of these sequences do have a pitch per step, but the problem with them is it's difficult to play chords when you have a note pattern within the sequence. So if you see a sequence with pitches set in the pitch row, generally this means that you should play it note at a time. Otherwise, if you don't see any pitch data, you can play chords. Now if beta line is enabled, you can actually press a chord or note prior to the next beat, and that will be delayed until that beat starts. This is very useful for registering all the keys of a particular chord in advance so that they all start together. But if I turn beta line off, as you can hear, the sequencer starts the moment I press the first key. So turn this option on if you're playing live and you want precise starting of notes on beats. Otherwise turn it off, especially if you're driving this sequencer from another. Now in some of the presets we've used vibrato, and I want to show you how that is constructed and how we get that vibrato and how to adjust it. So take a close listen to this note. Now it's kind of subtle in this patch, but you can certainly hear it, and notice it's delayed and it fades in. Now we can see this patch uses oscillator 1 and oscillator 2. So let's take a closer look at oscillator 1. As we can see here, oscillator 1 is simply a saw wave, and oscillator 2 is a saw wave, but it's got 7 semitone shift on the oscillator. Switching back to oscillator 1, I want you to notice that this LFO FM knob here, FM stands for frequency modulation, is set. The same can be said of oscillator 2. Now if I turn these up slightly on oscillator 1 and oscillator 2, it will emphasize the vibrato a little bit more. But obviously that's overkill, so let's just reduce them a little bit. But that's how you adjust the vibrato level for an oscillator. Now the vibrato is controlled by an LFO, and we've got 4 LFOs here at the bottom. But the LFOs are linked via something called the mod matrix, and if we switch to the mod matrix tab, you'll see on the LFO 2 column we have 3 entries alongside the oscillator FM. That oscillator FM 1, 2 and 3 corresponds to the LFO knob, LFO FM knob on each of those 3 tabs. Now oscillator 3 is not actually being used at the minute, as you can determine by the tab, but we could quite easily set the LFO FM knob there too. So if we take a look at the LFO tab, you'll see the 4 LFOs here, the little graphical representations, and if we click on the LFO2, you'll see the routings, and you'll see that they are currently being routed to oscillator 1 to 3 FM knobs, LFO FM knobs. So we use this selector here to select which LFO we want to change, and we can see that this is beat synced, this LFO, and it's beat synced to an 8th note. So that's the speed of the vibrato currently. It's set to an 8th note, but we can change that speed to anything we want. We can increase that and take a listen. The vibratos tend to fade into obscurity when it's that high, and I could increase the vibrato level and play that again. You'll probably notice that more if I actually slow it down rather than speed it up. So let's give that a go. Now I only changed oscillator 1, so the 2 oscillators are doing vibrato at slightly different intensities. So the important thing to take away from this is that LFO FM knob controls anything that comes in on the mod matrix to that particular row, that particular destination. Now we'll take a closer look at the mod matrix in future videos, but for now, notice that oscillator 2 is also manipulating the filter as well as the FM on the oscillators. But if we look up here a little bit further in the mod matrix, we'll see that LFO1 is manipulating the pulse width knob of the oscillators. So if we look at oscillator 1 on the oscillators tab, we can see this is also beat synced, but beat synced a little bit slower to a quarter note, which means the square wave is being modulated at 1 cycle per quarter note. Now I mentioned a minute ago when we were looking at the mod matrix that LFO2 was also modulating the filter, and you can see that here. It's also modulating the noise oscillator and oscillator 2 pan. So let's take a look at the VCF, the voltage control filter tab, And see how we apply modulation to the filter. Now if I just play a single note and you focus on this visualization of the filter, and we can apply modulation using this LFO mod knob in a similar way to we did with the oscillators. Now notice that the vibrato fades in over time, and if we take a look at the LFO2 in this LFOs tab, that there's a delay set, but if we decrease that delay to 0, although we're not getting a delay now, we're getting an attack due to this attack knob. So in general, these two knobs are used in conjunction with each other. So if I was to set a delay and no attack, and let's just increase the intensity of that so we can hear it a little bit better, and we'll do that on both oscillators. And let's just delay that vibrato a little bit longer to over a second. Now that vibrato comes in quite abruptly, so let's increase the attack time. So now hopefully you can see how the delay and the attack knob work together to create vibrato. Now if we return to the Mod Matrix tab, you can see which columns have settings in, and I can double tap on any of these to remove them. And I can also tap, hold and drag left and right to add my own settings in here. Now as we previously learnt, the LFO2 is controlling the oscillator FM frequency modulation, and we could change these if we want. I can double tap to remove the LFO2 control, and I can add control from LFO3 if I wish, just by tap, hold and drag. I can even have two oscillators, two LFOs, control that oscillator 1 FM if I like. So now we've taken a look at loading presets and a few of the things that you might bump into along the way. I want to look at being able to save your own presets. So assuming we've come up with this nice sound, so in order to save this preset, we need to open the preset manager by clicking the little button at the top and hitting the save button above the files list. But you'll notice if we do this, we'll get an error message because you're not allowed to save presets to the default bank. So first select the user bank, then an appropriate group to save the sample or preset. In this case I pick pads. I hit the save button, give it a name and hit the save button, and the preset will be saved. Now if you wish, you can create your own user banks in here. You can even create additional groups if you haven't got a group that's suitable for your preset. Now assuming you've created your own unique bank and it's got lots of groups all for the presets, how do you back that up? How do you back that up? And the answer is using the built-in file manager. So if we open the Files app in iOS, we can simply, let's just delete that file I've got in there, we can simply tap on a preset and drag and drop that preset directly to the Files app. Alternatively, we can actually drag a complete bank directly from the banks folder and just drop it into the Files app. Now if we click on that, we can see that it contains all the groups and all the presets within that bank. And it's just as easy to take any one of these files and just drag them back directly into the preset manager, but I've already got it there, so there's no point. Now I can long press on this bank and create a compressed zip from that, and then I can long press on the zip and share that back to my PC or Mac, as the case may be. Alternatively, if you want to send a friend a copy of your bank, it's as easy as that. Now, since I announced the forthcoming app, Oscidia, I've had a lot of questions, and I want to take some time to try and answer those questions best I can in this video. Now, I want to point out first and foremost that there is a user manual available within all my apps just by going to the help menu and picking help manual. And these are quite comprehensive, and the great thing about them is that they are shipped with the product, and therefore they contain information about the current version of the product. And if you ever exit and re-enter the help file, it always goes back to the page you were looking at. Now, there are people out there that probably on small iPads or iPhones that want to access the manual separately and not view it within the app. Now, to do that, you can use this export PDF button. And if we press this button, it will then prompt for a place to save a manual, a PDF manual. So all we have to do is pick a folder and then hit the save button, and that manual will be written out. Now, there is one caveat with this. It saves the manual, and if I click on the manual, we're getting a small version of the manual there, but you can go full screen with this. And I might need to zoom out a little bit, but we get the manual. The only one problem is that if you export the manual like this, the hyperlinks from the table of contents do not work. Other than that, it's a fully working manual. Now, the built-in manual will be constantly updated as I add new features to Oscidia. So that's the reason I don't ship separate manuals, because they very quickly become outdated. Now, Oscidia does support MPE mode, and you can use that in a number of different ways. If you're in standalone mode, there's a keyboard toggle button on the right side of the keyboard which toggles between MPE and standard mode. Now, this is really handy for creating and testing MPE supported patches. Now, you know you're in MPE mode because if we look at the pitch bend knob, you'll see that it says MPE on the pitch bend. In other words, we're using pitch bend per note. Now, most of you will be using an external MPE keyboard or some kind of controller, and we can turn that on or off in the settings. Now, by default, Oscidia is set to 8 notes of polyphony. We can increase that up to 16 notes if you wish, but it ships us at 8 just in case you're on a device that is not great in terms of CPU power. Also, if you're on a smaller iPad, you may want to go into the settings and change this allow full screen mode to off. That way, when we are in a DAW with restricted screen area, it collapses the interface and the interface becomes scrollable. Now, this is the mode that's default to iPhones. The iPad has the full screen mode turned on so that it's always showing a full screen. In other words, both halves of the display in one. Now, hidden away in here is the effect ordering submenu, and the nice thing about this is we can change the order of effects. You can apply these effects to each preset, but if you change the order, that order of effect will be saved along with the preset, so that's very useful to know. And lastly, channel aftertouch can also be enabled here. If you use an MPE mode, you'll probably also want to enable channel aftertouch. And again, if you're using MPE mode, you might want to configure CC74 to be something else to control another parameter, and you can do that using a mod matrix. Now, the other thing I've been asked is if we store our presets as we do in banks and groups, how do we access these presets when it comes to MIDI program change messages. Obviously a program change message needs somehow associating with one of the presets we have inside Oscidia. And the way we do it is using this bank assignment window. We can set the bank and sub-bank here, and we can simply drag and drop presets directly from the preset manager and create almost set lists out of presets that we have currently inside of the preset manager. So this might be a little bit time consuming to drag and drop like this. I'm not quite sure what happened there. Let's click on another one. But you can build up a known set list this way. Just do one more. Or if an alternative way is to actually click on this button here, click say default, and then pick one of the categories, and it will populate this list with one of the categories from the chosen bank. So now I can send program change messages directly to Oscidia from my DAW. Now the last thing I want to go over today in this video is the wavetable oscillator type, because wavetables can mean a lot of different things to different people, and there is no one format of wavetable. And we need to draw a distinction between wavetable and wave cycling. They're two completely different things. So Oscidia supports wavetables, not wave cycling. And a wavetable is a file that consists of a number of frames. If we alter this morph knob here, you'll see that this is not only cycling between the frames, but morphing from one frame to the other. So in reality there's only, I think, 63 frames of wavetable here, but when I move that morph knob, as you can see, there's lots of possibilities there. Now that's just a single static frame, but I can morph between the frames and find anything that sounds interesting and use that as a replacement for, say, a saw or a sine or a triangle waveform. But the fun starts when you start using automation. So if I turn morphing on and press a key, you'll see that it will start morphing very slowly initially, because the morph amount is set quite low. The higher the morph amount, the faster it will morph, or the more frames it will morph through. Now that's just one way to animate a wavetable. So if I turn the automatic morphing off, the second method is something called phase distortion or warping. And we have a whole bunch of these algorithms here that can be used to change the actual phase as the note progresses. So as you can see here, as I press a note, you can see that kind of wobbling left to right. This is taking a static frame from the wavetable and applying phase distortion to it. So we can use the warp and the warp amount knobs to change how this algorithm works and how it morphs the knob. In general, the warp amount knob changes the amount of the warping, and the warp knob usually changes the position. Now if we look at the mod matrix for a minute, you can see that LFO3 is modulating the morph, and LFO4 is modulating the warp. So by changing these LFOs 3 and 4, we can change things like the speed of morph. So by clicking on the actual LFO animation, you'll see what's controlling what. You can verify that very quickly. So if we select LFO3, which controls the morph, you'll see that it's quite a slow sine wave, whereas when we click the LFO4 button, you'll see that it's a little bit faster. It's a sine wave again, but it's a little bit faster controlling the warp. But we can change the speed of that simply by turning this speed knob. And using the oscillator speed and the warp amount, we can control how quickly it transitions around that phase. So let's turn the warping off and enable the morph, and then we need to change LFO3 speed to get control over the speed at which it runs through the frames of the wavetable. Now we can use the morph knob to change the frame at which it starts to morph from, and obviously the morph amount is how much it morphs, and all that will be governed by the speed of the LFO3. So by using combinations of warp and morph, we can get some nice movement going, and that's the idea of wavetables, is to create movement, and that movement then is applied alongside other oscillator types like the triangle wave or the sawtooth wave, for instance. Now you're free to load a new wavetable, and there are a number of wavetables that ship with Oscidia. And it's even possible to add your own. So we can simply click on this button here and select a different wavetable and utilize that instead of the ones that are already pre-assigned. And this is a great way, like I said before, to add texture. I mean, just look at the wave types in this particular wavetable. You would get nothing like that under normal circumstances from your conventional wave types. So one important thing to note is not all wavetables are the same. Oscidia uses a kind of standard where we have a WAV file with multiple frames of a particular size. Now, Oscidia, unlike some wavetable synthesizers, is not limited to the size of the frame. The frame's usually something like 256, 512, 1024 or 2048 samples in size. You can use any of those, and Oscidia will try and estimate what the frame size is. This is where it can get a little bit difficult, because you can force Oscidia to, if it doesn't recognize a particular frame exactly, you can force Oscidia to recognize it, and I'll explain that in a second. Some wavetables have built-in metadata which we can use to detect the frame size, but not all wavetables include the metadata. I'll be honest though, all the built-in presets that use wavetable are using the default waves, 3 default waves. They're actually configured when you init patch. So when you init a preset, each of the oscillators is assigned one of these default waves, and I've found that they are flexible enough to be able to be used for in most cases. You can open the this wavetable manager and drag and drop wavetable files to and from this. Again, using the Files app, and just to demonstrate this, I can drag one of these wavetables out of here and it will appear inside of the Files app. Now, the iOS Files app is not showing extensions, file extensions, but believe me, it has a .wav extension on this. You need to use .wav files in order for this to work. Also, if Oscidia is not detecting the right frame size for your wavetables, you can append S2048 to actually force Oscidia to treat it as a 2048 sample frame size. Now, it's important you don't just throw any old WAV file in there. It has to be a proper constructed wavetable, not just a plain old audio WAV file. So here we've thrown together a preset that has a supersaw and a wavetable, and it sounds like this. And that wavetable alongside the supersaw just gives it a little bit of movement. Now notice the LFOs are reset each time I press a key. So if we want either the morph or the warp just to keep going and not get reset, we can turn on note sync on oscillators 3 and 4. Either that or disable the trigger, it achieves the same thing. Now, enabling note sync on LFO4 ensures that the phase of LFO4 gets reset to a previously playing note when a new note is played. In other words, it just syncs the LFOs of previously played notes with newly played notes. This is good for things like vibrato and stuff, so that all the vibratos are in sync. So that's just about it for this video. Another pre-release video, but I think it's one that answers a lot of questions that people have been asking. So I hope this helps in some way. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and thumb up this video, and I'll see you next time.